Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grand Designs Live, to Grand Theatre. I hope you're having fun. Grand Designs, again, sponsored by Airflow. It's been a great morning so far. We've got lots going on. Has everybody had a look around the show? Is it good? You're shaking your head. You meant you haven't had a look around. You didn't mean it's not good. Okay, I can't hear you, but I can imagine what you said. But yes, it's fantastic. We've got Kevin's Green Heroes over there. We've got the Great British Box Room Competition. And there's lots going on. And of course, there's Ask the Expert. But you're on the Grand Theatre. This is the Grand Theatre. And we're here today. We're going to be talking to you about modular building. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, cool. Anybody here think, yes, you do as well? One, okay. We'll come back to that. Okay, so anybody here thinking of building their own home? Okay, right, so this talk, really, really excited about this talk. And the reason I'm really excited about it is because I think that modular building, or MMC, is one of the best ways that you can self-build your home. So you're in the right place. But to explain that a bit further, I'm going to bring out my expert panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, can you give a big round of applause, please, to the panel? Thank you. Welcome.
Anybody?
So, you can sit anywhere you want, except for here, because this is my seat.
You're there, Kunle.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. I thought we went through this backstage. I sit here, you sit over there. Anyway, guys, how are we?
Brilliant, thank you.
Very well, really good.
Good. For those who don't know you, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Start with James on the right.
I'm James from Studiania. We're architects who specialize in MMC design or modular design.
Yep.
So I'm also James, so two James on the couch.
Both architects?
I'm a RIBA chartered architect. We're based locally in Essex and we work on the grand design circuit, doing the talks and sharing our expertise.
James, pleasure to be here.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm director at InFrame Garden Rooms and Extensions, and we specialise in panelised steel frame design.
And I'm Graham O'Doherty. I work with a company called Any Offsite, and we help advise people project manage projects where you're looking at sort of working with modern methods of construction, off-site construction, or modular, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, fantastic. So, guys, you wouldn't have seen, but I did ask earlier if there were anybody in the audience who was thinking of self-building. Can you just put your hands up again so we can see where you are? Okay, fantastic, great. So, look, in about 20 minutes or so, we're going to be opening up to questions. So, if you have a question, put your hand up and we'll help you out. But, so, what I was saying to the crowd audience was that I felt that this, or modular, or MMC, whatever you're going to think, represents quite an interesting way for them to enter their self-build journey. But I think, first of all, I'll start with James, actually. You know, the talk is called modular, but what do we really mean?
What we really mean is about some part of the building being pre-manufactured in a factory environment. So traditionally, most of the industry considers anything that's built on site to be traditional and anything that's built off site to be modular, prefabricated, or numerous terminologies. But anything that's built off site in the factory controlled environment is considered modular.
Yeah. And James, I mean, the other James, I can't even say James the architect, so I don't know what to say. James Glasses, there you go. James Glasses, in terms of, what are the different types of construction that can come under this kind of off-site or modular umbrella?
So the most common is probably timber frame, or what was called SIPS panels, so structurally integrated panels. We have steel frame. We have, and these can be certain aspects of the build as well. But I would imagine the most commonly knowledgeable one is the timber frame. Which we can factor into the design.
And Graham, I mean, timber frames are hardly modern methods of construction, are they?
They're not. 400 years old at least, with some churches that are still standing, and there were people who were sometimes scared of using timber. It is a bit silly, but the word modern in this context is taken simply because it's not yet mainstream. And so because it's not mainstream, there's a decision that modern will be the terminology. So it's an unusual one, but nonetheless, that's my reasoning behind it. And Reba also give the same excuse.
Yeah, and just so the audience know, all the images behind us are from an article in Grand Designs magazine, which was published last year, and these are their top 10 self-build modular homes. So these are all self-build homes, and they were all made using modular or MMC construction methods. But James, so if you're thinking of getting into a self-build, what are some of the benefits of using MMC?
So really speed. You see with most self-builds, they take a significant longer length of time to build because you are managing your time, you're managing building it usually with another activity. With prefabrication in the factory, you can bring the panelized system or a fully volumetric system to site and rapidly increase the pace of construction. That's the main benefit.
And in terms of guarantees of design, i.e. you're going to get what you actually want set out for. Other James, is that one of the benefits as well of MMC?
It is, yes. So what people often see this as a con for the scheme, but the design has to be fully considered at planning stage and early, before it's even fully fabricated. It's a fixed scheme. So there is little manoeuvre in terms of making changes and things like that. But you would also have already considered your electrics, they would already be installed. So yeah, in terms of having a fixed scheme, it's pretty much the route to be moving in terms of modular build, really.
Mm-hmm. And so what you're effectively saying is we can almost guarantee the budget, time, design. And Graham, are those the three main benefits of going down this route of construction?
I think whenever you're comparing different methods of construction, you're going to look at the classic triangle of time, cost and quality, and which gives you the best balance, which system will give you the best balance of that. If you're a self-builder, you're likely to want to not have to pay rent whilst you're building your own house, so you're going to want to reduce the time. But at the same time, you're not going to want to have a home that lets all of your hot air out into the atmosphere and contributes to carbonising the world. We don't want to do that. So you've got to have the right quality. You've got to specify it at the right time. And if you specify something early and say, I want to build to this standard, when you're manufacturing something, it is built to that standard. You're not reliant upon people on a muddy, wet, cold building site to do it for you.
Okay. Stuart, at InFrame, you guys use a lightweight steel structure.
We do, yeah.
What are the benefits of doing that, even for something like a garden room, for example?
I think we're open to the elements in a garden. So speed, as we've talked about, is key to getting the building weather tight. So we can get weather tight incredibly quickly. So we can panelise our steel in the factory, bring that in, and within a couple of days we can be in a weather tight situation.
And that would be the same as well if you were building an extension or something at someone's house. You can use the same system in order to speed that up, can't you?
That's right, yeah, exactly right, Kunle.
Yeah. Well, so does anybody out there, has anybody ever heard a story of anybody whose job cost more money than they thought it should have done? Yeah? Yeah? Well, you're laughing. That's not funny. Has anybody heard a story about somebody whose job went on longer than it should have done? Yeah? And has anybody heard a story of somebody whose job in the end wasn't quite what they thought it would be or quite what they were designed? There you go. Right. Those three things are what Graham was referring to as the triangle. And by using or utilising MMC, especially as somebody who's a novice, so somebody who probably hasn't done it before, as some self-builders will be, that is a great way to mitigate those three risks, to make sure that you do not go get a job that isn't what you wanted, took way longer and cost you a lot more. James, when you're designing buildings, some people might think that doing something that is prefabricated means that you have less design choice. Is that the case?
No, it just means you make that choice earlier and you got to stick to it. So a lot of the main failures with building your own home is you decided everything too late and you're halfway through the building, you change your mind and you move it all around, and that's costs loads more money. A late decision is probably the biggest expense in a build project. So when you're using a prefabricated modular approach, we force you to make that decision very early, and that all the design decisions are made very early, and that mitigates the problem. So it's a better design process and it's a better build process.
And James, I mean, you know, that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, it may seem like it's not, but to make sure that you've gone through that design process in a kind of concise, coherent way before you do anything, that's always the best way to deliver a project, isn't it?
It is definitely. So as James said, there is the most cost, or the cost implication on site is making changes whilst on site or very last minute. So you are forced to make the design decisions early on. And with that, it does mean that the design process and the planning process can take a lot longer, so that needs to be factored in. But it does, we know what limitations each system has, so that will guide the design as well. We know the thermal efficiency, we know the cost. So in terms of offsetting timescale at the beginning to get these design decisions correct and make sure you are happy with the layout so you do not have to make changes when on site, because it is all prefabricated, it's all built, it comes like a giant jigsaw puzzle in layman's terms, and it's pieced together, so you cannot be making, you know, chopping and changing wall positions or even door openings. The electrical conduit is all run in factory, so you know, to make those small changes is a cost on site, so all that needs to be considered up front. So it sounds very negative, but it is actually one of the benefits of a modular system.
It is, and people think that it sounds negative, but actually that's what they should be doing anyway.
Correct.
And the benefit is that this forces you to kind of do that, doesn't it?
It does, and what's very key is it makes you think about how you're going to be using that space in much more detail than what you would. You know, with a standard extension, your kitchen might be located here, your dining area. But it really gets you thinking about where do you want your light switches, where do you want your appliances, and that sort of. So it gets you visualising that space early, which really should get you guys excited about the build.
Yeah.
It should, get you a bit of hunger for how it's going to be finished.
Yeah, and there's certain risk elements in any construction project. I spent years building houses, renovating them, and the risk is all in that is in the cost and is in the time and is in the design accuracy. But if you condense all that risk into a quite tight point and concentrate on that, effectively, Graham, it feels like you're de-risking the process to some degree.
I think the de-risking is something which, whenever you're starting any project, you want to start with a risk management strategy. So what are the risks that we can see? And I think both of the Jameses have alluded to the risk is you changing your mind on where you want the light switch or where you want your bathroom. And those are the sort of things that can be visualized with digital design technology. And you can even immerse yourself in a room using virtual reality, and you can actually see what it would be like. And those are the design tools that I know one James uses. I don't know if t'other James uses them, though. But they're really good tools.
Yeah. And Stuart, some people might be thinking, we're talking primarily about self-build here, but you can use MMC or modular construction as part of an existing building, either to build an outbuilding or even an extension, because you can join it to an existing building that is even a Victorian or Edwardian building.
That's right, a barn, anything. So we can do extensions in light gauge steel, that are, as Kunle says, attached to your existing dwelling, or we can do an outbuilding as a completely separate, customizable or bespoke design. And I think just to touch on the point the guys were talking about, in terms of something we've probably all got experience in traditionally is the standard openings and the doors, the windows. All of that traditional build is done, and then the survey happens with our system and MMC. We're doing that months before, and as soon as we start building, all of the doors, windows and all of that can be ordered, so it's almost as soon as they're ready, it's an on-time delivery. And again, we're weather tight a lot earlier in the programme than traditional methods.
What's quite interesting about the InFrame system is, and we talked about this some months ago, was that we looked at the time scale of doing an InFrame system next to a time frame of doing a traditional build. And we looked at, we imagined, didn't we, that there were two houses next door to each other. They were both doing a pretty standard extension. And by the end of the first week, the InFrame one was up, roof was on, the walls are in, and it was watertight. They were still probably laying concrete for the foundations in the one next door. And that is the kind of difference, if you utilize this kind of technology in the right way, that you can gain. And that's also the same for a traditional build. James, when clients or self-builders are thinking about different types of modular or MMC process, so volumetric, panelized, what are the things they should be thinking about, and what factors affect which way is best for them?
Yeah, so each different system has its pros and cons, and it depends how much you want to self-build and how much you want to pre-manufacture. So a panelized system where you're installing it yourself, you'll be looking at lightweight, costs and size of panels, and different materials suit this. But you can also consider full precast panel systems and move all the way up into the more commercial systems and bring it back down to self-build. And then fully volumetric is, in the custom market, you can, moving from self-build to the more customized market, you can produce boxes that you fit out so that you can take it all the way up the manufacturing chain. And there's different variants mainly in terms of cost and how much you do yourself. So the more you purchase from a manufacturer, the less you produce yourself.
And James, I've seen some sort of proper volumetric solutions where effectively either the entire house or the house comes in literally sections and is bolted together with the kitchen fitted. I mean, what other things come in a volumetric solution?
Well, it comes pretty much. It can be pretty much finished, other than some real sort of finer finished items. I mean, the one thing to consider with that would be your site access and constraints and things like that. So I think you will be making the decision of what system to use earlier on than what you realise. But yeah, with a volumetric, it can pretty much come more or less a finished item off the shelf, as you say, bolting on. So you need some finishing items, but all your windows and doors are in, everything like that. It's all fully sealed and ready to go.
James, that's a really good point, actually, because Graham, you'd have to consider that. That would be one of the biggest factors, because for whatever reason, you may live on a busy trunk road, or you may live down a mews, you might not be able to get a crane in or whatever you need. So access is important, or your site, to think about what system you'd use.
So we work primarily with commercial clients who are doing a minimum of sort of 25 houses or 30 apartments or something like that. So when we're doing those sort of projects, and anything up to £50 million worth of project, you've got to make sure that you've got it right, because there's a hell of a lot riding on it. So we do a survey right at the very beginning, during the very early stages of a project, before an architect is even involved. Is we would look at it and say, yes, you can use this system, or no, you can't use this type of system. And then that feeds into the design process, and it's done in advance. Yeah,
so effectively, I mean, and that probably goes back to the initial question of how to make the decisions, but one of the factors to consider, I guess, James, is you need to make sure you're talking to the right people at the beginning. So an architect with experience delivering this kind of build.
Yeah, so the majority of the industry is still looking at traditional, and there's a few specialist architects who work in this sphere. But even in that, you have architects who specialize in panelized, who specialize in CLT, who specialize in fully volumetric. So the choice of system will be informed by the experience of all the team working on it. And the most success we've had is where all the team has some experience of that particular system, that system approach.
And James, I mean, that might worry some people a little bit, because they might think, well, there's an architect that I really want. I don't want to be forced to work with a certain architect just because I'm choosing a particular way of building it. But is it possible that you can work with your own architect and then work with a specialist who may, I guess, for a better one of a phrase, modularize your design, so you can still get the design you want, and then look at it?
I'm no expert on all of the panelized and the modern methods systems, but I have done prefabricated projects before, and it is just a case of your architect engaging in conversation with the correct teams early on. As we say, different systems have different constraints, so that does guide the design in terms of structural openings, accessibility. Do you need smaller timber panels? So it's more about your architect being forthcoming with engaging in conversation with the correct team of consultants early stage, which then comes down to the transparency of the client. What systems are they interested in, and what's their purpose for these systems as well?
Okay, so it's a case of you can still work with your architect, but don't think that you can just take any design and that means you can build it using MMC. You've got to then take it to somebody who will adapt it. And a lot of those adaptations will be within the fabric of the building as opposed to the actual design. So you'll still get the look and feel. I mean, is that about right, do you think?
Yeah, so externally, in terms of material finishes, that side of thing can still be changed, and you can have your own character added to the build. It doesn't have to be just timber. It doesn't have to be sort of metal or render. You can have these bolt-ons effectively to give you the aesthetic. You can still create the spaces that you want. It just needs to be factored in nice and early so that there are no real concerns or design sort of clangers, for want of a better term, as the design develops, which could effectively cost client money or make huge design sacrifices, which ultimately isn't what we want to be producing.
Graham, some people might be thinking, well, I live in an old Victorian house, or I live in an Edwardian house, a Georgian house. I don't want to use a modern method of construction because I don't want that kind of modern look. I want a traditional look. But it's still possible to utilise MMC as simply a building mechanism and get the aesthetic of anything you want.
Yeah, and in different sectors, I've worked. I'm thinking particularly of a school in Dunstable that I worked on, and it was a Victorian school, and we have the opportunity to either sort of blend with that, or we have the opportunity to contrast. The client in the end chose to contrast, so we went very modern and linked that into the Victorian building. But I've also done other buildings, a residential project, which was a Victorian, next to a Victorian house, and we copied the arched windows. They were installed in a factory, and everything was done in the factory, delivered to site, and 7 days later the project was finished. So there are ways that you can do it.
Yeah. And Stuart, at InFrame Space, you do garden rooms, but you also do extensions. Are you finding now that people are becoming more accepting, more understanding of these modern methods of construction?
Yeah, absolutely, Kunle. I think people get quite excited by the steel, the strengths, the recyclability, this whole life cycle. But again, to pick up on what the guys were saying, I think in terms of access, and we've all, not everybody's got a huge amount of access. So in our system, we pre-panelise. So that's one thing we do. So access is never a problem. We can model the system digitally to come through your home and take all of that into account. And by the same token, a lot of our clients work with architects they've worked with before, for example, and come with us with plans. So we'll translate that and take that design and translate it into manufacturing and assembly methods, so that that's ready in our system with the customer's design. So they get exactly what they were looking for in the beginning, but in our system.
Yeah, so it sounds like, your clients can choose what they want. In fact, they can have the entire thing completely finished with all the kit inside it, craned on effectively onto site. It could come in panels, like,
that's
in
right,
four sides. Or you can do it in a way that it can all fit through a front door.
That's exactly it.
Right.
And we can either take it from the very beginning and design it in our system from the outset, or we can take a customer's design and translate that for them.
James, at Anya, traditionally you guys have done some quite big jobs. You did the Citizen M Hotel on Tower Bridge, which was one of the first big modular hotels. But have you found that some of the tech, some of the technology and the thinking is now, diffusing down, as it were, into the self-build market?
Yeah, so the government's got a huge drive to increase the self-build market and also to increase the MMC market, because traditional house building in the UK has largely failed to deliver the quality and the volume that the government wants. So the big drive is tied together the insurance industry, the mortgage industry, and building control to drive modern methods of construction into MMC and custom build markets. So we're seeing a lot more engagement of developers and self-builders and to look at different ways of constructing.
Yeah. So look, it sounds like if we if I was going to go on a self-build journey, if I used MMC, I could get design certainty, so I'd be 100% sure that what I designed was what I wanted. I would get budget certainty, so I would know that the budget that I'd set was exactly what I was going to spend. I wouldn't be told halfway through the job it was going to cost me another, 50%. And it would be done within the time that I had been told. When you consider all, and also, and I can have it in any finish I want, so it fits any design, and I could use my own architect. Why aren't we all doing it?
I think a lot of it comes down to it not originally being mainstream. So clients are often scared of what MMC means and modern methods of construction. They tend to think, oh, that means it's going to be expensive, it's modern, when ultimately it isn't modern. These methods have been around for years, but what's happened is it's slowly become refined and it's slowly becoming mainstream. And I think that's picked up on the fact that the large-scale developments are being built in these methods because it can become more cost-effective, it can become speedier. The house I live in is actually a prefabricated house shipped over from Norway during the war. So it just shows that these methods have been around for a long, long while, but people just aren't aware of it. And don't get me wrong, the thermal quality isn't what the new standards are, but these methods have been there. It's now time to not be so scared about what these are and embrace it and enjoy the journey of the method constructions.
But just to go back to that point, the reason the thermal qualities aren't to modern method isn't anything to do with the construction.
No.
It's just to do that it's 50 years old or
it's
something.
50 years old,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we've got
And
the
things have moved
insulation
on.
in my house is sheep's wool. It's that old, and it still works, it's still nice, it's still comfortable, but the methods have just developed and they've grown and they've improved.
Yeah, and the more important thing is, I think, in my view, the reason that this country, unlike mainland Europe, the US, hasn't sort of fully embraced MMC or modular construction is the kind of hangover that we had after those really poorly designed, poorly constructed, prefabricated houses that we built in a real hurry that have only been in the last 10 years that are still around now after the war. I mean, Graham, how difficult is it for people to kind of get over that and understand this method of construction for what it really is?
I could give you a little analogy now, is that...
I love an analogy from
Yeah. An Englishman's home is his castle. We all know that phrase, and we all believe that castles are built from stone, and that every stone block is chipped out of a quarry and taken to site and built on. And that analogy now, if you then compare that to what's happening, Japan is one of the best countries for pre-manufactured housing. And 90% of what they build is pre-manufactured in a factory. They have invested in companies in the UK recently. Their two biggest house builders are in the UK, delivering homes probably as we speak. And so we can get over it. We've got to have a little bit of a mindset, and we've got to think there are different ways of doing things than the way that we've always done them.
Yeah. And Stuart, people might think about build quality and think, well, this thing linking it to these prefabricated houses. But I've seen one of your guard rooms, and in terms of build quality and in terms of the insulation factor, it's better than my actual house.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's really like a high-level new build, or the quality you expect at a high-level extension in the back of your garden. So it really is an extension of the home, either on the home or at the back or side of your garden to give you that extra space you need.
Ladies and gentlemen, we only have about 10 minutes left. So if there are any questions for the panel, please put your hands up. So we'll go to start the back, and then we'll come forward. We won't forget you. Sorry, your mic's not on.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear.
Hi guys, thank you so much. I've been taking some notes, not like the usual naughty kids sat at the back, but MMC and offsite is an area of which I'm sort of working with a varied range of developers and suppliers, so it's one that I completely vouch for in terms of those savings around time, cost and quality, 100%. That's not my question. My question was when thinking about embodied carbon, and I know that MMC and offsite solutions already, it's more cost effective than traditional to have that conversation. But what new emerging technologies or materials would you recommend to kind of help me with that quest, really?
That's an interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Well, I'll ask everybody that actually, because it's really interesting. And also, is it easier to make things more sustainable by building in a modular way? So, James, you first.
No, it's exactly the same, but we can measure it better because it's a digital process. We're finding more accurate information. Some of the studies we're doing on MMC have shown that it's actually higher carbon in a fully volumetric system, which everybody says. So once we measure it, I now know this is a fact. In traditional, 30 to 40, 50% of what you build is waste, and that we can't quantify. And that quantifying, you're losing half your building because of waste. We can't quantify the amount of carbon we're using because we don't know.
Yeah.
But in the manufacturing process, waste is 5%, and I can measure, because it's a digital tool, I can measure everything.
So it sounds like what you're effectively saying, if you were going to build a house in a traditional way, there'd be loads of waste, cutouts from plasterboard and bits of timber. Weirdly, timber always comes in odd sizes, so it's always cut off, isn't it? James, so it sounds like using an MMC solution, there's much less waste. So is that one of the benefits of, going back to the question, reducing the embodied carbon?
Yes, I think so. I think the key word there is the efficiency. The efficiency of manufacture, the efficiency of the install, but also the final performance of that building with on-site labourers and materials. There may be offcuts and wastage, but there's also sort of areas of doubt in the quality of that installation. Are there, have they taped and joined all the plasterboard correctly? Are there any air leakage gaps? With a prefabricated system, that is minimised virtually to non-existent standards. But I think the efficiency is where the carbon-friendly side of things really kicks into play there.
Yeah, and Graham, over to you. But quick, I also would like you just, for those that don't know, can you just very quick definition of embodied carbon, what that means?
Yeah, sure. So embodied carbon is the amount of energy that is being used to manufacture your home. And that is embodied within the material that's in your house. You've then also got operational carbon, and that's about the efficiency of the building in use. So how much air escapes and how much air do you let in? So those sort of things are about the efficiency, and that's the operational carbon side. So the embodied carbon, and I think one point I want to pick up on is it's really important. If you were building your